Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
I have to say, I don't think when this book came out and the tour began, I didn't really expect the level of shrinkage. You know, he's going from 6'8", and by the end of the tour, I think he'll be about 5'2". I mean, liberals are attacking him. The members of the Obama administration are attacking him. Conservatives are attacking him. He's managed to have a range of people describe him as dishonest that is really pretty remarkable. And
you know what my
at
favorite
the same
was?
time, I got what?
My favorite was, I think he's 6'8", the former FBI director, trying to hide with the blue curtain to avoid the president. I'm like, really? You got to be kidding me.
It's just, he's a very big guy physically, but I do think psychically he has been shrinking with every interview.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. I'm just as floored as Speaker Gingrich is by the continual saga that is James Comey traveling around the country, going on all of the big shows. Yesterday was his big day on The View, and they kept him on for segment after segment after segment, and he talked about himself, and he even expressed some regret over whether or not he should have included the personal remarks that have been so widely commented on about President Trump. I noticed that in the interview, his eyes were lighter underneath his eyes, like right underneath his eyes were lighter than the rest of his face. So I wondered if, since he's written the book, he's been tanning, since that's a huge subject for him. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. We are still in Share-a-thon. This is the last day, and we want to finish strong. And we've been praying for listeners to make the choice to give to the Share-a-thon to help support what we do here. We have the Share-a-thon just a couple times a year, and this time we're asking for partnership on a monthly commitment for you to pledge to commit to support the ministry on a monthly basis. And we think it's worth it. We support it. We're doing all that we can, and we're asking for your help as well. The number is 800-326-4543. 800-FAMILIES, option 2 is the other alternative, the easy way to remember it. And then you can just go to urbanfamilytalk.com and click through from there as well. So we'd love to have you help us out with that. And then, so I want to get back to this audio from Newt Gingrich. He's on with Sean Hannity, and they're talking, and they get a little bit further into the deal, into the conversation. And Newt Gingrich talks about the corruption that was present. And I have something that I noted about it, which is even in the interviews that we've seen James Comey participate in, no one's really asking him, which I feel is kind of a really integral question to understanding his thought processes. If he felt that President Trump was so dishonest and so awful, why didn't he do something about it? Why didn't he just say, I can't work for you? You know, I love this job. He says he almost cried when President Obama, when he said goodbye to him at the end of his term. Why didn't he just say, I'm going with you, I'm leaving? This discussion about him being a Republican is so old and dry and nonsensical. It doesn't make sense, because if he really was one, he would have said, I have to preserve my party, I have to preserve what I have going on, instead of him making this big to-do about how he's left the Republican Party. So I want to listen to Newt Gingrich talk about the corruption. And then, of course, you can always weigh in. We always love to have our listeners call into the show, 866-963-2037. Let's listen to number 7.
I got intrigued this morning, so I went back. I reread Rod Rosenstein's report, which he gave to President Trump just before the president fired Comey. And then I read the recently released Inspector General's report on McCabe. And what's really sobering, and here I think what Alan Dershowitz was saying is so important, you had the number 1 and number 2 people in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, both engaged in behavior that clearly violated the law. I mean, I think the whole depth, the idea that the top two people in what is our preeminent law enforcement agency in the entire country, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Literally now you've had an internal report by the Inspector General saying McCabe clearly lied. You've had this analysis by Rob Rosenstein, which if you've never read all of it, is really staggering in the degree to which it repudiates Comey. And that's what President Trump got just before he decided to fire him. These two taken together, it's very sobering to think that you had that depth of corruption at the very top of the FBI.
Wow. So we're talking about, and this is proof. This isn't right-wing talking points. This isn't people just saying things because they like one or they dislike the other. The OIG report, that was all started and executed under career, as is so often pointed out by people on the left. They'll say, well, those are career service, people. So they're not partisans. So career service people completed the OIG report that resulted in McCabe being fired. Also, the information that Speaker Gingrich is discussing that he reviewed was some of what contributed to President Trump saying that he was going to let Comey go. Now, what's interesting about this to me in a lot of different ways is that we're actually getting from Comey some of the reasons why President Trump felt like he had to let him go. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say you have someone working with you and you're in an adversarial position with everybody else, and speaking of in the federal government and a lot of people in the FBI. I remember Sally Yates actually had to be removed because of her kind of unprofessional behavior. So you've got all this going on. And President Trump has asked him if he's loyal. Now, there are plenty of people who've explained adequately why that was an inappropriate question to ask, because the FBI director doesn't have to be loyal to the president. He's loyal to the FBI and to the pursuit of justice, pursuit of clear and upright investigations, and et cetera, et cetera. So I can understand that. But why would President Trump ask him that? Well, because at their first meeting, FBI Director Comey says to President Trump, well, there's this dossier on you. He doesn't tell him who funded it. And he makes it seem as if, listen, you may wonder about my loyalty, but I've got all this information on you and it's not been completely put out into the public. In other words, don't mess around with me. So of course, President Trump is going to ask, do I have your loyalty? And the question, I don't believe it was, do I have your loyalty if I'm breaking the law, if I'm doing something wrong? He's trying to figure out where Comey stands. Comey could have said, I can't be loyal to you as director of the FBI, but I can assure you that I'll serve in the Trump administration to the greatest of my ability. But he obfuscates. And remember, humans can smell fear. So let's say that FBI Director Comey is standing next to the blue curtains in the White House and he wants to fade into them, as he reported in his own book. Do you think President Trump didn't notice his demeanor? Do you think that the subsequent meetings, the requests for meetings that came from President Trump, that he's not at each meeting trying to figure out where Comey stands? And that is what this is all about. You've got, Comey quipping on one of the news shows that President Trump, this is the worst breakup he's ever had or something like that. Okay, this is the breakup to beat for him. President Trump fired him and now he's hitting back. But I just find it interesting that there's been no acknowledgement from Comey that he contributed to his own firing, that he actually brought about his own firing through his own actions. Had he just been candid with President Trump, or if he said, I don't feel comfortable being candid with him, I'm going to be candid with Vice President Pence, or I'm going to ask for a meeting with Ivanka Trump, basically the de facto right hand to the president, his chief confidant, his daughter. He could have said, Ivanka, can I have a meeting with you? I don't feel comfortable about these things. And these are dynamics, not FBI classified information or anything that would be outside of her, her security clearance. But I'm trying to create a new working relationship with the president. And he's obviously not anything like President Obama. And he and I had a very good relationship. And I don't consider myself to be a partisan. So this is not about politics. It's about me doing my job well. Can you give me some tips on working with him? That is actually a fantastic way to get into, the confidence of someone who can help you improve a relationship. And I'm sitting here, out in radio world. I've never worked for the FBI. I was a government employee, obviously, when I was on active duty. But even though I don't have the experiential background that FBI Director Comey has, I can tell you from people that I know who've worked in all different kinds of spheres that the people quotient remains the same. So yes, it's different people. Yes, the dynamics can be different because government work is it has a different feel to it. It has a different methodology, a mode to it. It's different, but it's still people. And I believe the reason that Comey didn't do this is because he didn't want to. He didn't want to have a good relationship with Trump. He didn't like him. He didn't want him to be president. And so while he called himself a Republican, it's almost as if when he says, now I feel like, the Republicans have lost their way and I'm no longer a Republican, I'm nothing. Really, the moment he decided he wasn't a Republican anymore, if you listen to his own words and the chronology of the events as they occurred, he decided he wasn't a Republican anymore when Donald Trump was sworn into office and became his boss. Indirect, but still his boss. Because all government employees, all active duty service members report to the commander-in-chief. This is not a secret. So it's not like only I knew that from back in my days on active duty in the Air Force. Everybody knows that. So I think there was corruption here and no one's asking Comey about it. No one has asked Comey, if you felt like this dossier could be true and this man has been elected to the presidency, why didn't you leave? Or why didn't you pursue other avenues to make sure that this information could be utilized in a way that would possibly end his presidency? And he would say, well, I didn't want to be partisan. But you can't really have it both ways. If he truly felt that President Trump was an existential threat to the government and to the United States, how could he continue to work under that? How could he? He doesn't want to be partisan. He's got all these excuses as to why he did or didn't do. But no one's asking him the questions that I feel like absolutely must be asked in order for this to be a true conversation about what happened while he was the FBI director. And so the book, obviously, a book from someone who's been fired, it's going to be one-sided. The reason you read it is because you want to see their side. But is it possible that in writing this book, FBI Director Comey has ultimately impeached himself for dereliction of duty while on the job because his feelings and observations and analysis based on the president, based on others who were working with the president, based on the dossier that he seems to believe is factual without substantiation, but with full knowledge that it was paid for by a political campaign, he seems to think it's the truth. How could that be? And him not feel some kind of responsibility to have done something to right what was wrong in his estimation. How does he get away with that? And I think it speaks to the larger issue of what we see from the Democrats right now. We see, the rampant double standards. People on the left can joke about killing people on the right. They don't lose their jobs. They're fine. People on the left can sexually harass women for decades. They can rape women. They can do whatever they want, not give women jobs, not pay them equally. Really, they get away with it until it's convenient to throw those people under the bus as you speed towards prosecuting and impeaching and getting rid of someone who's a Republican who may be guilty of those same things. So wrong is only wrong when a Republican takes part in it. But if a Democrat takes part in it, it's just no big deal. And so when Comey talks about how he says President Trump doesn't know the truth, he constantly lies. But he was close to and worked closely with President Obama, who lied repeatedly about the major piece of legislation that is the legacy of his entire presidency, Obamacare, and other things. President Obama lied while he was the president of the United States. We know he lied. Even PolitiFact, which is a hardcore leftist rag, they even said he lied about Obamacare. But James Comey never, ever thought President Obama had a problem with the truth. You see what I'm getting at here? He's not passing the smell test. The further into this book tour we go, the worse he looks. All right, when we get back, we're going to talk about Paul Ryan leaving his position and some details straight from his own mouth via audio and more. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
American Family Radio and Preborn are partnering to help save babies' lives throughout America.
Well, my name is Dan Steiner, and I'm the president of Preborn. Ultrasound truly is a game changer. When a mom comes into a pregnancy center under pressure to abort her child, perhaps the dad's gone, perhaps her mother is pressuring her. Most of the time in her heart she doesn't want to abort, but what she needs is something that will give her the strength to choose life against the pressures forcing her to consider abortion. That's the ultrasound. If she hears her baby's heartbeat and sees that baby on ultrasound, 80% of the time she'll choose life.
Be a compassionate answer to abortion and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com now. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. For many years now, I've kept a journal. This journal contains records of my prayers, struggles, victories, defeats, dreams, and so on. In fact, by looking at them, you can see where I was at any given point in my life, what I was going through, what was facing me, and what was on my heart. Sometimes when I need a shot of encouragement or perspective, I'll grab one of those journals and read a few pages. Almost always the same thing happens. I'm struck by a sense of deep gratitude toward God for where He's brought me, how He sustained me, and what He's done in my life. In 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 8, God was responding to David's desire to build a temple for God's glory. Listen to these words. Now therefore, thus you shall say to my servant David, thus says the Lord of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people Israel. Think about that. God says to David, I want to remind you of something. I took you from following sheep, and now I have made you the ruler over my people. The emphasis is on what God has done, not on David's ability or what David deserves. We should never forget we're an exhibit of the grace and mercy of God. Any good in our lives has come from the hand of the almighty, tender, loving, gracious, merciful God. On top of that, we're instruments of His purpose and plan. God says, I made you ruler over Israel. God wants to use us and work through us to bless and benefit other people. Here's what I want you to remember today. Make it a part of your spiritual discipline to occasionally reflect on where you've come from. A journal might help. You'll be a very grateful person.
Crawford Loritz is senior pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Well, let's talk about your retirement. Obviously, a big announcement. I know you said you want to spend more time with your wife and kids. Obviously, very understandable. You've said things to me like that privately as well. I do want to get your reaction, however, to some other speculation out there. Listen to the former Republican governor of New Jersey talking today about your decision. He said, quote, it is a big indicator that the speaker doesn't think he'd be speaker anymore. If you're a betting person, you're betting on the Democrats for the House in the fall, unquote. Now, again, I know family played a huge part in this decision, but isn't Governor Christie correct that the odds are that you wouldn't be speaker anymore come January?
No, actually, I really don't believe that. I think that's just not true because we have an excellent track record to run on. Look at what the economy is doing. Look at wages, look at bonuses, look at tax reform, look at the regulatory relief. We just rebuilt the military. That's actually taking place. We've actually passed an agenda into law. We are one of these crazy people that actually said what we would do while we campaigned, won the election, now we're doing it, and it's making a positive difference in people's lives. So I really think we're going to have a very good story to tell. So I'm confident we can keep this majority. It's one of the reasons why I was comfortable making this decision, actually, Jake. You know, in a funny way, I decided to do this. Number one, as you know, my kids are now teenagers. They've only known me as a weekend dad because they were born after I was elected to Congress. So that's a personal decision, but I was able to make that personal decision because I feel like we have put our majority in a good place because we have gotten a lot done. It's making a big difference in people's lives. So I'm confident I'm going to be able to hand this gavel over to another Republican speaker. And because of that list of accomplishments, I actually feel content and confident.
So that's Paul Ryan, and he's speaking to Jake Tapper. And there's, to me, it's kind of interesting because when you look at it or listen to what he's saying, Jake Tapper is holding him to a much higher standard than he holds the Democrats to. When they have someone leave, they always blame the Republicans. They don't leave any room for the Democrats to own up to why it is that they've lost or done something. It's just like, oh, so you're leaving because you think you're going to lose. And I have heard that from both sides. I've seen some conservatives say it. I've seen some people in media say it. And I do think it's a really defeatist type of an attitude that makes it hard for the Republicans to work and get things done. And it also depresses what regular voters are willing to do. You just start checking out. You're like, well, just forget it. Why should we work at it? Why should we do anything? We're going to lose. Have you ever seen a team operate like that? And seriously, if you watch a team and if you see them get demoralized during the game, especially I'm thinking of basketball, but this happens in football and other sports as well. If you see them get demoralized, you can actually watch them slow down and not play as well. You can actually see it happen. And the reason